couple of buys this week. They called it Buy-mageddon because there was a whole lot of teams that were on buy this week. But we'll go ahead and start from the bottom, work our way up like usual. So re-entering the list for me this week, I'm going to put the Chargers at 10. They're coming off their bye week. And I don't like to move teams if they, with bye weeks, I don't like to discount or regard for them. They have the Chargers this week at home. Or they have the Patriots, they have the Patriots this week at home. So that won't be an easy game. As you know, in years past, Bill Belichick eats up young quarterbacks. So it'll be interesting to see how this defense plays against Justin Herbert. Good that it's on the road because the Patriots play much better in Foxborough than they do on the road. So it won't be an easy game for the Chargers this week, but it's a game in which they're better than the Patriots. So if they can beat the Patriots the way they should, then I'll give them the respect that they deserve. But if they fall to the Patriots or just barely beat the Patriots, that's not what I'm looking for in terms of top 10 teams. The Titans, man, huh? I'm gonna put them at 9. They stay even from a week ago. They were 9 a week ago as well. The Titans were able to blow out the Kansas City Chiefs, and I mean blow them out. It was 27-0 at half, and then they just ran the ball the entire second half. I called it as an upset on my social media this week. I said it was going to be the upset of the week, but I don't even know if it was truly an upset. I called it an upset because Kansas City is Kansas City, and they are probably better than the Chiefs, or it's probably better than the Titans, but I wish I would have looked at what the Vegas odds were on it prior to that game, because it said everything about it said that the Titans were going to win that game. For one, it was in Tennessee. The Chiefs defense allows 7+ yards of play. Tennessee had the best running back of our generation. It wasn't even, the crazy part is it wasn't even Derrick Henry that went off. It was low-key Ryan Tannehill, because Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown decided to have a breakout game because they really hadn't done much to this point in the season. So he kind of, they kind of had a big game this last week because I thought I thought that Derrick Henry was just going to go absolutely crazy on that Chiefs defense because the Ravens were able to run it pretty well on the Chiefs defense when they played a few weeks prior. But Ryan Tannehill threw for 270, and he was super efficient, 26 for 27, 105 passer rating. He even had a rushing touchdown as well. One of his better games of the year. He had a pretty good game against the Seahawks, but one of his better games of the year for sure. And A.J. Brown's best game of the year by far this year, because he was pretty highly touted coming into the season, hadn't really done much. That's not their fault necessarily. That's why I never liked Julio Jones going to Tennessee, because that's just not a team that runs it 30 to 45 times a game. Or 35 to 40 times a game. That is not where Julio Jones should be. Julio Jones needs to be in Green Bay. He needs to be in Arizona, Dallas. He needs to be Tampa Bay. He needs to be where they on those teams that air it out, So that's Tennessee at the 9 spot. At the 8 spot, dropping 5 spots, is going to be Baltimore. As much as I try to stay, I do stay unbiased as much as I can possibly. Baltimore lost to the Bengals pretty bad at home, which is not what should have happened, but it did. We have to remember, though, that Baltimore is playing with 17 players on injured reserve. 17. That's literally 30% of an NFL roster. So, not only is Baltimore 5-2 to this point, they're 5-2 playing with guys that they've just picked up off the street. A bunch of free agents, a bunch of practice squad guys, and they're still winning, which I think you have to give Baltimore credit for that. If any other team in the league was missing their all-pro corner, their entire running backfield, had to pick up a whole new backfield, 3 guys on the offensive line, a backup tight end, a really good blocking backup tight end in a running offense, and, a former all-pro defensive tackle. I think if anyone else was missing those kind of pieces to their team, they would not be playing as well as Baltimore's playing right now. I would venture to say if Baltimore had their backfield, right, if Baltimore had Marcus Peters, things would be very different right now, because having Marlon on one side and having Marcus on the other was gigantic for the Ravens defense because, and you can tell this year because last year the Ravens pass defense was really good, right? Our secondary was very talented, but it's not the same because Marlon admitted in an interview we played it last week that he has a lot on his shoulders because he's the leader of that defense now. He's got to try to pick up their best guy week to week, and so he's taking a huge load when before they could really just put those guys on sides, right? And Marcus Peters could cover the best guy, and so could Marlon. But he is struggling a little bit being that only guy. And so I have to give Baltimore credit for what they're doing with what they've got at the table. Every team always says, it's a next man up mentality, but definitely with Baltimore, it's 100% been a next man up mentality. Also, they're a top 5 rushing offense and a top 8 passing offense. It's just crazy to think that if Baltimore wasn't this injured, if they were fully healthy, what Baltimore would be. Because honestly, I think they've kind of gotten away from the run game, if I'm being quite honest. Last 2 games, they haven't even rushed for 100 yards. So I think if we had J.K. Dobbins, we had Gus Edwards, we had those guys, had a healthy offensive line, I think things would be very different in Baltimore. But got to give them credit, though, still, for what they're being able to do. Up one spot is going to be the Packers at 7. I finally saw from the Packers this week what I've been waiting to see from them in a while. I think they're probably... they're probably, in my eyes, the 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC, right? Because Arizona and Tampa would probably be better. Maybe the Rams, right? Green Bay plays Arizona tonight. And so this is going to be a huge matchup as far as end-of-the-year implications go. But they finally played the way I wanted them to. I still, like I said before, they still have problems as far as they just are so heavily dependent on Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. And if Aaron Jones doesn't get going, then they have to just... But they only throw it to Devontae Adams is the problem. Valdez-Scantling finally had a breakout game last week, but everything looks good though for them. They're still 6-1. Their defense is playing well, so I still like their chances. But they just haven't had the dominant win that I'm looking for from them, as they haven't been playing the greatest teams. If I'm being quite honest, they coming up for the next couple of weeks for them, it doesn't get much easier though. They have the Chiefs, which will be an easy win. Seattle, I guess that'll be an easier win if Russell's not back by that point. Then they got Vikings, Rams, Bears, Ravens, Browns, Vikings, Lions. So they have a couple of games here where if they can make a statement, if they can blow the Chiefs out like they should, I'd like a blowout for the Chiefs. If Russell Wilson isn't back, they should blow out the Seahawks. They got to beat the Bears by more than they did last time. And then they got to be beating the Vikings and the Lions pretty significantly to end the season. So if they can prove some stuff here upcoming, they were my pick to win the NFC at the beginning of the year. If they can prove, that they could beat teams that aren't as good as them, that'll be good for their image for sure. Up 2 spots, I'm going to put Cincinnati. I had them in the list last week, but they're a little bit better than I anticipated. They spent $200 million this offseason on defense. Okay? Their defense is like 15th ranked, right around the middle, okay? Which is where they've never been in a very long time. They've got everything they need offensively. They've got, a top 10, top 15 quarterback in Joe Burrow. They've got Jamar Chase, who's on pace for a whole lot of records. They've got C.J. Uzman, who's had a little bit of a breakout year for sure. When you have a great quarterback, people always say this, when you have a great quarterback, everything else just kind of falls into place, right? It's pretty hard, really aside from Deshaun Watson last year, it's really hard to have a really good quarterback and have a bad team. It's really hard, honestly. When you think about the teams that are the best in the league, they all have elite quarterbacks, right? You got Arizona, it's got Kyler Murray, you got Tampa, you got Tom Brady, you got the Bills, you have Josh Allen, the Ravens have Lamar, the Rams have Matthew Stafford, the Cowboys have Dak Prescott. They all have elite quarterbacks, right? the teams that are bad are the teams that have either a struggling quarterback or just a young quarterback in general, right? Like a rookie quarterback. So the Bengals have everything they need to be a successful team. Joe Burrow is still, I think he's like second or third in QB hits and sacks. So the offensive line still isn't as good as it should be. Which it just baffles me when a team has great. They run the ball well. Cincinnati runs the ball well, right? They're towards the top of the league. I didn't pull it up, but they're towards the top of the league in rushing stats. But Joe Mixon is in the top 10 for sure in rushing. But so it's the same thing with the Bears. It's just crazy to me that the offensive lines can run block really well, but they can't pass block. I know it's two different things, but it's just crazy to me. So the Bengals have everything they need for sure. Talented offense. Defense is better than it was advertised. But when you spend that much money on defense, it's going to happen. And when you've been such a bad defense for so long, anything is better, honestly. So they improved big on the defensive end, and that's what they needed to do. At the 5, they had a bye week this week, so I'll just keep them there. Is the Cowboys. They have the most explosive offense, I'd have to say, in the NFL, if I'm being quite honest, right? I seen a stat this week that said they're on pace to have 2,000-yard rushers and 2,000-yard receivers, which has never happened in NFL history. CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper are both on pace for 1,000, and then Tony Pollard and Zeke are both on pace for 1,000 yards rushing. So that has never happened in history. I'm pretty sure I looked at the Las Vegas odds for MVP the other day, and I think Dak is like second, which just baffles me, if I'm being quite honest. Because, like I said last week, he's not the reason for their success, honestly, really. The defense is playing very well. And when they get the run game going, I don't want to say when the ball is out of his hands more, but when the ball is out of his hands more, when they run it and they hand it off to Zeke and Tony Pollard, they win more games. On the Vegas odds, he is second behind Kyler Murray. He's ahead of Josh Allen. He's ahead of Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford. It blows my mind, if I'm being quite honest, that Dak Prescott is second in MVP odds. That has to have, just America's team boost on it, because I really don't think he's that great of he's the reason for that much of their success, if I'm being quite honest. So that's the Cowboys at the 5 seed. At the 4, I got the Rams. They're down 3 spots. To be fair, Detroit threw the whole kitchen sink at the Rams. So, but they still need to be beating the Rams by way more than they did. It was. I mean, like I said, the Lions faked a punt. They onsided a kick. They did everything they could to try to win that game. Poor Lions fans. Sorry. Excuse me. So, like I said, this is a week-to-week evaluation, and so they didn't, against a 0-7 Lions team, didn't look as good as they should have. But they still have everything they need. Matthew Stafford, he should be higher in the MVP odds than Dak Prescott, but he's not. Matthew Stafford's playing well. Cooper Kupp is just insane. He is just a fantasy machine. If you had Cooper Kupp on your fantasy team this year, you're probably pretty close to undefeated or not, only have 1 or 2 losses, because Cooper Kupp is just an absolute monster. And then they're getting healthier in their backfield as far as running backs, so they're running the ball really well and stuff too. Rams have everything they need as well. All these top 4 teams, top 5, honestly, have everything they need to be Super Bowl contenders. At the 3, I'm going to put the Bills. They're going to go up a spot. They had a bye week this last week, but they're still, even though I don't know how the tiebreakers work. I thought that the tiebreakers worked on margin of victory, if I'm being quite honest. But I'm going to do something real quick, because I think the reason why the Buffalo Bills aren't the league leading, like they don't lead the AFC, like the reason why they have the tiebreaker, or the reason why the Bengals have the tiebreaker, is because of records. I think like the strength of their schedule. So they played. So their very first game of the year was against Pittsburgh, who's 3-3. Okay, so Pittsburgh's 3-3. Give me just a second. I'm gonna try to do this real quick. So they have 3 wins against Pittsburgh has 3 wins and 3 losses. So let's see here. And then their second game was against the Dolphins, who are 1-6. Okay, so that's 4 wins and 9 losses. And then their third game was against the Washington football team, who is 2-4, I believe. The Washington football team is they are 2-5. The Washington football team is 2-5. So that makes it 14-6. Let's see. 6-14. And then their next game after that, after the Washington game, was Texans again. Or was Texans. Texans, then Chiefs. Texans, then Chiefs. So the Texans were, let's see, the Texans are 1-6. So 27. And then they had the Chiefs, who are 4-3 or 3-4. Correct. The Chiefs are 3-4. So 10-24. So this is, I think I'm kind of seeing it now. This is, if you remember last week, I had said that the Bills, even though they're probably the best roster in the league, if I'm being honest, they have elite corners, elite linebackers, an elite pass rush, an elite quarterback, a good to all right run game, an elite offensive line. They have the weapons offensively. They have everything to be, what they need to be to be the AFC contender and be a Super Bowl contender as well. So this is the team that has everything they need. But this is kind of crazy because their opponents' combined win-loss record is 14-26. That's just over 500. Or excuse me, I did that math wrong. They have 14-26. The teams that they've played are a combined 14 wins and 26 losses to this point. And I think that's why the Bills aren't the number 1 seed, because the Bengals have played, I can already tell you right now, because they've played the Packers, who are 6-1. They've played the Ravens, who are 5-2. So that's already 11 wins for them. And then they've played the Steelers, that's 3 more, that's 13. The Bears have 2 wins. So that's already, the Bengals already have, just from that, doing that off the top of my head, that's already bet more wins against their opponents, already have more combined wins. So that's kind of crazy to take into effect that the Bills' opponents are combined 14-26. So take that as you want. The Bills are a talented team, and they beat the teams they should. They've had 2 blowouts this year, 2 shutouts, 40-0. So they beat teams as they should, but that's kind of a crazy little stat there, for sure. All right, sorry, getting back on track there. I just wanted to take a look at that. So Tampa as the 2 seed at 6-1, they're up 4 spots. Again, that's a team. They played the Bears, a Super Bowl team blowing out a horrible team, as they should be. Tampa is a well-oiled machine, even without Antonio Brown, even without Rob Gronkowski. Tom Brady is on another level. If I'm being quite honest at this point, Tom Brady is up there as far as MVPs for me. If I had to put out my MVP favorites right now at this point, it would probably honestly have to be Kyler, Tom, Matthew, Lamar. Would have to be kind of like the top of the list for me, for sure, because as crazy as it sounds, Kyler Murray, his knock kind of was his throwing a little bit, kind of like Lamar, but not as much. And he leads the league in completion percentage at 73%. That is otherworldly. That's kind of on your Drew Brees status. So the fact that they have as much broken play, mastermind stuff as they have happened, and Kyler's a scrambler and stuff like that, he's 73% completion rate. It means he's efficient. He's not only hitting his deep shots, but he's hitting his short shots. He's hitting his medium routes. He's hitting his checkdowns. So elite efficiency from Kyler Murray and company. And the defense for Tampa Bay is finally starting to pick up a little bit, right? If they played a bad offense in the Chicago Bears last week, but that's all it takes to give the defense a little bit of momentum, right? And then, as you can expect, at the one spot, I'll have Arizona. I wanted to put Tampa at the one spot because, honestly, I think if Tampa played Arizona today, Tampa would beat Arizona. I truly think that. The Arizona Cardinals would lose a track meet versus Tampa. I think they would. But I'll leave it as I only put them at the one spot this week because they play Green Bay tonight. That was the only reason why, because I wanted to give them at least that 1 week up at the number one spot before they maybe lose to an elite team in the NFC. But we'll talk about that in just a second. So back through the list, at the 10 spot, I got the Chargers. The 9 is the Titans. The 8 is the Ravens. The 7 is the Packers. The 6 is the Bengals. At the 5 is the Cowboys. 4 is the Rams, 3 is the Bills, 2 is Tampa, and 1 is Arizona for Week 7 of the NFL Laythams list for the NFL.